I believe that TikTok is a psychological weapon. They will push in the algorithms content here that is weakening us, and they won't allow it in China at all.
A more divided America is only a more dangerous world. Can Americans see this? Can we come together and unite?
Patriotism is contagious, I believe. We weren't this divided 15, 20 years ago, and I think it could come back real quick. If we don't all step up and help save America, we're gonna fall. There's a lot of people who are in their careers and don't wanna rock the boat. But at a certain point, when will you stand up for what you believe in?
DC Draino, I'm so excited to sit with you. These are such crazy times.
To say the least.
I feel like in some ways we kind of grew up together. You ran away from Hollywood. I ran away from education, but we did something about it. You know, we built PragerU. You built a huge social media brand. And here we are facing some of the things that we've been really warning America about.
Yeah.
It's almost overwhelming, to say the least.
Well, I would say you're like the older sister I looked up to that's crushing it a lot more than me.
But I look younger than you.
Yes, absolutely. Paternal twins. How about
there you
that?
Go.
But you know, PragerU has just been doing such a fantastic job, and it's an honor to be on. And yeah, we do live in chaotic times, and I think few understand it more than those that still live in California. You know, we're here back in America and the free state of Florida, and things are better, but it's an arduous fight that we have, and the last couple weeks have just been full of chaotic news.
For those who don't know that much about your background, I don't want to assume that everybody knows how much experience you've had. Can you just share where you came from? The belly of the beast kind of gave birth to your brand. Just describe that to us a little bit.
So I also used to live in Los Angeles. I was a Hollywood entertainment attorney, which is crazy to say out loud at this point, but I was doing movie deals with the Weinstein Company. And let me just say that everybody knew, so not a surprise. But yeah, I was doing film finance deals in Hollywood. And after the 2016 election, I knew I had to help support this revival to save America. And so I created a anonymous Instagram account called DC Draino. And eventually it started growing, and I made the decision to quit everything in Hollywood, move out of California, and move to the free state of Florida and fight on the social media battlefront. And, 5 or 6 million followers later, here we are. So I definitely encourage people, if you do want to get your voice out there, do it. Just put it out there on Twitter, on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever it is, because you never know if you're going to be able to be a force in this battle, and we need everyone possible.
I remember when we first met, you told me that Hollywood was a political ATM.
For the Democrat Party, they are. I would watch out my window in Century City, and Obama would come in and land in the Osprey, Marine Osprey, with his presidential helicopter, land there, and then he would go do a 2-day tour around LA, hitting up, the heads of the major studios' houses and these private dinners, and you'd see him almost every month or two just collecting tens of millions of dollars from these, far left Democrats. And I will say I interacted with a lot of people in Hollywood that were very professional, but when you would watch the award shows, they really just turned into political rallies. The actors, the singers, the writers, they just hated middle-class Americans, in my opinion, people that drive SUVs and want schools that teach education, not grooming and indoctrination, and people that want a closed border, and they tried to say that they were the enemy. And I just couldn't stand that I was working in an industry that made these people richer. And so I decided to fight against that cultural toxicity. And thankfully, PragerU has been doing a great job on that front, and actually replacing a lot of what Hollywood was doing, especially with the kids' content.
Well, I want to ask you a real honest question about that, because we feel like we're building momentum, and there are other organizations that are doing a great job trying to create an alternative to Hollywood. And we're growing, we're getting millions of views. But my question is really, do you think that's enough? is it actually working, or are we just spinning our wheels? Sometimes it feels like there is immense growth, and what Disney is doing and, the Oscars, it's so repulsive, it's so disgusting. It should be so obvious that people should run away. And sometimes I wonder, do people just have their head in the sand, or do even freedom-loving conservatives have enough stamina, have enough conviction to actually walk away from the things that they find entertaining or that brain candy that they love so much? Do we have enough stamina to fully walk away from Hollywood and start consuming a better alternative?
I think, yes, short answer. I am wildly optimistic about what's happening. What's probably the number one song right now out from, was it Beyonce? Was it called Texas Hold'em?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And I've seen some like kind of fashion articles about trends in Hollywood. It's called the California Cowboy, and guys are wearing boots and hats, and that's the fashion. That to me is a victory. We are replacing Hollywood culture with traditional American culture, and even the people that are not on our side are pushing it. So I do see some glimmers of hope there. But also look at what Angel Studios did with that movie, The Sound of Freedom. I think it got over 130 or $40 million gross revenue worldwide, which is, was one of the top 5 or 10 movies for the year. And Angel Studios has been putting out more and more movies and documentaries that Prager has put out, and Epoch Times and Daily Wire. I mean,
I bet Tom McDonald.
Tom McDonald with his music. Ben Shapiro had the #1 rap song. I mean, if that's not taking over culture.
I told my geeky kid, if Ben Shapiro can do it, so can you.
It's right. He's breaking the glass ceiling. So it's going to take time. Hollywood didn't take over American culture overnight. It took decades. And the left didn't take over Hollywood overnight. That took decades. So I think we are absolutely making substantial progress. And if there's one thing everybody should know, there's a lot of money to be made in creating these alternative cultural vehicles. If you're going to make good music, if you're going to make movies, TV, documentaries, children's books, whatever it is, whatever the parallel is to the toxic leftist culture, patriots, the 75 plus million people that voted for the other guy in 2020 will buy this stuff because they're awake to the agenda. And it didn't used to be like that. A lot of us still were kind of like, well, it's fine. I can't watch a single like TV show. I like Yellowstone. All right. I like that. But most shows we see right through it now, and we just tune out.
What do you think woke people up?
People like you, people like me, people that had the courage to say something's wrong, and they're trying to go after us. And even though they tried to shame us and ostracize us and call us conspiracy theorists and radicals and, this supremacist and that supremacist, and we just said, no, this is wrong. And now I think the grooming in the CRT in schools, the trans agenda, the woke agenda, the racial totem pole that they're enforcing on it used to be in colleges. Now it's all the way down to the kindergartens. And I think once you started messing with the parents, and even parents who weren't that political, they said, stay away from my kids. And that is why in the Virginia election, we saw Governor Youngkin. He swept it in a purple or blue state, and that was about the school agenda. And I think that's one of the most powerful arguments for why this country is changing. It's people want to protect their kids.
Some people are dubious about the number of patriots that are willing to stand up and get involved, but I think you're a classic example of how one can galvanize this audience that is hungry for a better solution, whether in education, entertainment, certainly in politics. Remind me real quick, if you remember, how many followers do you have? I just remember it's a gigantic number.
I have over 2.6 million on Instagram, 1.4 million on Twitter, and then combined across everything over 6 million.
Yeah. I mean, that is so significant because I think for some people who are sitting at home and don't really know whether we're actually making change, whether there is growth, to hear from somebody like you who left Hollywood, built something totally on your own, independent, no outside major funding, to have a combined 6 million person followership, that's really, really huge. It's really significant.
Well, thank you. And I say I'm a 6-year overnight sensation because it's literally just 300, 400, 500 followers a day at a time. And every now and then you get lucky, you get a big, something goes kind of viral, you maybe get 5,000 or 10,000. But I will say, before I started DC Draino on Instagram, my personal Instagram had about 220 followers. I was one of those guys that posted maybe once a year. I did not care, and Facebook was even less. So if you find something you're passionate about, an angle, look at Libs at TikTok, for example. She said, I'm done letting these people groom the kids. I'm going to just share it on a different platform. She takes TikTok videos, she puts them on Twitter, and she has almost 3 million followers and is one of the most powerful political forces in this country. And all she did was share what she saw on TikTok to X. And she stood for something that was righteous. And I think that's as little as it takes. People want warriors. There's a lot of people who are in their careers and don't want to rock the boat. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, when will you stand up for what you believe in? And if that time isn't now, when is it? Because the red alarms are ringing. And if we don't all step up and help save America, we're going to fall. So get involved.
There's something so freeing. I was talking to Haya Raychik of Libs of TikTok. And I know you and I have been talking about this for years, about how free we feel that we can actually speak the truth and not feel like we're in some diamond cage where we have to be careful about what we say. And it's almost like once you cross that threshold and you start speaking truth, it's like the shackles are off and you're free. I mean, that's what real freedom is, yes. Giving away that fear. And you become smarter when you don't have fear in yes. you, right? You just become more sophisticated, more intelligent, more resourceful. Your instincts sharpen. It's such an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And I promise you will find 10 times as many people that support you as those that disagree with you. I'd say it's even 100 times. Yeah. At this point, I've got people that tell me, hey, I used to be liberal. I used to not like you, but honestly, your posts have changed how I look at this stuff. Or, oh, COVID woke me up, or, the grooming agenda. I mean, when you stand for what's right and you lead, others will eventually follow. And what I try to do is create more leaders, right? I'm not trying to necessarily wake up the sheep. I'm trying to wake up the other lions and say, now's the time, get in the fight. And it's not as often spoken about, but I think you bring up a great point. You will be truly happy doing this. It'll be a little scary at first. I've seen it. People, they kind of dip their toe in. They're like, ooh, that's a little nerve-wracking. And then they go all in, and then they become just so vocal, and you never see anyone go back. No one ever falls back asleep. No one ever falls back into timidity. They stay emboldened. And when others actually see you doing that, it not only inspires them, but you actually kind of create opportunities, right? There's an ecosystem of opportunity. If you want to work in this sector, there are a lot of jobs, or people will make jobs for you, or you can stay independent. So it's not only freeing and a source of happiness, but it's a way to actually make a living.
Right. It's the freedom industry.
It is. Yeah. It's the privatization of freedom, right? It's capitalism and freedom. I mean, if that's not the most, traditional American way to go about it. So we're very blessed. It wasn't always like that, especially 5 or 6 years back in our day. But
right. Well, one of the reasons why I follow you and some of my friends follow you is because we don't trust the news anymore, right? It's so hard to know what is even true and who is paying whom, especially when we're talking about legacy media. And so people like you came onto the scene as an alternative. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, how do you find the news? Like, what do you, what does your day look like? Are you just consuming huge amounts of articles to figure out what is true and what is false and what should one read?
A friend of mine once told me, he's like, we need to get people up off the couch and get involved. And he looks around and he points at me and goes, except you stay on the couch. And I think that's kind of true. I'm best if I'm able to sit in a quiet spot and just consume the internet like everyone else does every day before work and, even at work. And I look at the major stories of the day that are either being misconstrued in the media or that I believe should be highlighted in the media. And that's just what I focus on. If I think we're getting an agenda pulled over us, for example, the Ukraine war, not to get too into the specifics, but I was very against American involvement from day one because I saw what the Biden crime family had been involved with over there. I felt like there was a bit of a cover-up here, a bit of a distraction, and a bit of a desire to pull the world into World War III because it's the biggest distraction of all. It's also very profitable and, it's a way to cover your tracks. And I put those words out there and I got some heat for it. But I'd say in hindsight, things have largely steered towards that direction. So a lot of it's just instinct, reading what I'm reading. And I read everything.
Both sides.
Both sides.
I'm not even sure it's only two sides anymore. Who knows how many sides, but you just scan the news.
Yeah, CNN, Drudge Report, Fox, Newsmax, MSNBC. I follow, people always get upset at me. They say, why are you following, Rachel Maddow and Kamala Harris on Twitter? I'm like, because I want to see what dumb things they're saying. And then I'll go say things in opposition to that or AOC. I mean, that's the difference between the right and the left. We actually want to know what they're saying so that we can counter it. The left just wants to block us and deplatform us and go, la, 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 I don't want to hear it. But it's a massive disadvantage to them over time. And a lot of it just comes down to they have propaganda and we have facts and logic. And that's why they want to shut us down.
And this is a really tough question. And so if you want to avoid it, it's fine. But you know me, you're going to get some tough one. Are there news agencies that you trust more than others? Like if you had to give advice, given that this is what you do for a living, if you had to give advice to someone on where to read the news without having to spend 8 hours on the couch every day as you do, is there a place where you could say, you know what, it's probably okay if you go there? I mean, maybe the answer is no.
There's no one-stop shop for all news, unfortunately. I think the rise of independent media, I have a lot of sources for different aspects of news. Like I get a lot of news from Joe Rogan. I get a lot of news from Ben Shapiro. I get a lot of news from Gateway Pundit, Steve Bannon, PragerU. Certain people have certain strengths, right? So like Libs of TikTok, if there's a lot of trans news going on, I'm going to go to her and see her page and see what's going on. If it's more deep state corruption, election irregularities, I'm going to go to some other people that are a bit more in my camp. So I wish there was a one-stop shop, but I just don't think there is. But I have listed off, some of my favorites. And honestly, just following independent journalists. If you follow enough of them, you follow Charlie Kirk, you follow, a bunch of these other, Jack Posobiec, Cat Turd even. Cat Turd is a great source of news, and that's wild to say out loud, but he is. So those are the truth tellers, and there's a reason why they have very big following numbers is because over time, people have said, we believe you, and we want to know what your opinions are on these matters, and then ultimately always come to your own conclusion.
So you're saying basically like follow individuals, multiple individuals, and then try to discern based on that, what makes most sense to you, as opposed to say, I'm always going to believe everything from Fox, or I'm always going to believe anything from any particular organization, which really, I guess, leads you to a situation where you do rely on social media, on these social media platforms in order to follow these individuals, because any individual ultimately also could be corrupted. So you want to be able to follow multiple people. And if you're not following only legacy institutions that have their own apps, let's say, then you become more reliant on what we call at PragerU, the beast of the internet. And that leads me to TikTok. So this has been a very controversial topic recently, to ban TikTok, to buy TikTok. to free TikTok. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there was a very, I'll say, controversial bill passed in the Congress, and it's going to the Senate. And I will say, I agree with the bill. And that scares me because that passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. So that means I'm now agreeing with a lot of people that I previously don't usually agree with.
Like Nancy Pelosi.
Like Nancy Pelosi. Not AOC, thankfully. I'm still clean on that one. But the bill, for those that don't know, would do two things. It designates that if any foreign adversary, as determined by a vote in Congress, owns a website or social media platform that operates in America, they have to either sell it to an American entity or it will be banned. So TikTok, if this bill does get passed, and Joe Biden has said he would sign it. Again, I don't know why I'm on the same page as some of these people, but if it passes, TikTok would have 6 months to sell itself to an American-owned company. Now, I like that. I'm not necessarily saying ban TikTok, but if they don't comply with this, I agree with that because I believe that TikTok is a psychological weapon for the Communist Chinese Party. They have everything in China is run by the Communist Chinese Party. They're a totalitarian government, and TikTok is no different. And they will push in the algorithms content here that is weakening us.
Well, they are already doing that.
And they won't allow it in China at all. So why is it good for us but not good for them? We know why. They're trying to propagandize the youth. They're trying to influence them. And we're seeing, 800 to, I think Dr. Phil is saying an 800% increase in trans identity amongst female teenagers. Just pops up out of nowhere, but also at the same time that TikTok pops up and is super popular amongst teenage girls. So it's not a big leap to make that conclusion. And that's a threat to our national security overall. It leads to bad results, as we're seeing. In the UK, they just banned their national medical system. They banned genital mutilation and sterilization procedures. You can't give puberty blockers to kids. We still do that in America, okay? But that's eventually going to stop. And so there's a lot of stuff on TikTok that pushes that. We saw it with the Israel-Palestine conflict. A massive upswell in support for the Palestine side.
Or the rioting and the burning of flags
Yes.
and here in America.
And we saw like a 20-to-1 prioritization in the algorithm of Palestinian content over Israeli. Now, regardless of what side you're on in that conflict, you can see that a thumb is being put on the scale. And that thumb is from communist China.
Right. They want to ferment division here in the
Yes.
United States, and they're using TikTok in order to push that and do that. And we
Yes.
know that our adversaries are not going to be able to take us down through bullets and tanks, and so they'll do this through these,
Yes.
mental mind. I don't even. The word game is an understatement. It's the pain that they're trying to inflict on us through that. Just to play the devil's advocate on this. And I really don't know where I land on it. I hate TikTok. I don't allow my kids to be on TikTok. But where does this end, right? If the government is now going to be allowed to ban the free market, I mean, is it possibly unconstitutional? Are they going to now take the next step and say, well, TikTok is banned, then therefore we can also do something to Instagram and to Twitter and or X, right? We finally got X to be freed, and we've seen how helpful that has been to us. So is that a possible government overreach and overstep? And would they say, well, okay, China or the CCP might not own TikTok, but they're going to sell it to somebody who is already in the Chinese pocket, for example. Like we know that here in the United States, there are people who are tied in already with the CCP. They own land around our, some of our most secretive military spaces in America. I mean, we know that there are people already here in the U.S. Could this just be a facade and a trick? Is it even going to work?
I think that's a very good point to bring up, and a lot of people have been concerned as to the slippery slope. If we allow the government to ban one app, can they then ban Rumble or X or Facebook? I don't see that as a realistic near-term concern, and here's why. The United States Constitution, especially the First Amendment, applies to American citizens. And we have seen a very expansive application of the First Amendment for social media companies. So a lot of people know Section 230 under the Communications Decency Act. That has been extended beyond its original intention to provide effectively a full liability shield for big tech companies in America. And what they say is they have free speech too, effectively. And I know Prager was involved in lawsuits. I'm currently have a lawsuit in the Supreme Court. And it's probably too protective of big tech companies. The difference here with TikTok is these are foreign citizens, Chinese nationals, and frankly, Chinese communists. They do not have constitutional protections. If you are going to play in our playground, you got to play by our rules. You don't get to have the same free speech rights because you're China. Just like if I was over in China, their rules would apply to me, not my rules. And if I started talking bad about their leader publicly on a megaphone, I would be arrested. And I would say, wait, but it doesn't work that way. So they have to play by our rules, and our rules only apply to U.S. citizens and legal immigrants. So I don't see that as an issue for domestically owned big tech companies. But again, we have to keep an eye on Congress, because if they've passed the Patriot Act, they will do bad things to infringe on American civil liberties. But thus far, I don't see that as an issue here with the TikTok bill.
I mean, maybe from another perspective is we are bleeding right now. We're bleeding in that we are seeing that our children are being attacked through TikTok. We're seeing the rise in fentanyl deaths. Many of them are related to, TikTok advertisements. You mentioned the transvestite movement, but it's not just that. It's the deaths that are happening from fentanyl, which is also pushed through China. And so you're saying we have to do something right now and hopefully be able to still hold our government accountable, but also not ignore the fact that we are being directly attacked through an app, which is completely unexpected. Nobody would have expected an app to be one of the ways that America would be possibly taken down, but it's become, I think, more dangerous than what people realize.
China is the greatest foreign threat to our country. Where did COVID come from? Where in China did it come from? Okay. Where is the fentanyl coming from? Yes, it's coming through our border, but it's originating in China. TikTok, the psychological warfare being inflicted on impressionable teenagers. There is and don't even get me started on the infiltration of Chinese financial interests in our government, right? Sequoia Capital is a very big investor in TikTok, and they pay a lot of money to Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, the RNC, the DNC. They are playing both sides. So that's all the more reason why this is a bit surprising that both sides have agreed to go after TikTok, given that there are some certain U.S. investors with billions of dollars at stake.
Well, I mean, so this is the other side of this, and my reaction is I don't want people to be duped, to think that now that the app would be owned by an American company, therefore they can, keep their guard down and just say, okay, the content now is safe. It's no longer the CCP. It's owned by Americans. Where can you trust every American company that would own this app? I wouldn't.
No.
I wouldn't. I think, there might be a political war around this, but hopefully out of this political war, Americans actually wake up and say, you know what, I'm just going to remove this app from my phone, from my children's phones. I think that would be a better solution. And we realize that some people will have their head in the sand, right? They may not want to do anything. They may not have that conviction or that mental willpower to tell their friends and family, just remove this app. If they're being told that now the app is safe because it's owned by Americans, then ultimately they'll be duped.
Yeah. Well, as we've seen, even when Americans own companies like YouTube and Facebook and Snapchat, it ain't much prettier. Snapchat, I think, is one of the worst apps that a young child could have. The The content on their explore page is just atrocious. Same with the algorithms on Facebook and YouTube. And so, but at least they're in our playground, and we have democratic mechanisms to steer that, right? So there are a lot of lawsuits in the courts right now. Our biggest issue is First Amendment infringement by big tech on U.S. citizens. There are 4 or 5 lawsuits in the United States Supreme Court, including my own, but also Net Choice versus Paxton, which is the Texas case, Net Choice versus Moody, which is the Florida. And those were state laws that said, hey, you can't infringe on free speech of citizens as a big tech company. There's Murphy v. Biden, which is formerly Missouri v. Biden. And there's NRA versus Vulo. And then there's my case, O'Hanley versus Weber. So by this July, we are going to have the biggest slate of First Amendment decisions from the Supreme Court, which has been an overall very good Supreme Court that will forever impact these big tech companies and how they infringe on our free speech. It's going to cut back a lot of it, especially the government involvement in it. With TikTok, we couldn't necessarily do that with these Supreme Court cases, because if they're operating under Chinese government restrictions, it's a lot harder. What am I going to go do? Sue the communist Chinese government in a communist Chinese court? No way. So at least we bring it into our house, play by our rules, and we can go after it from there.
Such an interesting perspective. I want to ask you one last question. We don't have much more time. So I'm coming in from Los Angeles into Florida, where you fled.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels to me like the country is so divided. It's so divided. Mm. And I am wondering, from your perspective, I've heard you tweet about a possible secession, a possible separation between states that are red, states that are blue. Is there a middle ground? Is it possible to still find unity? Could we have leadership that will unite us? Is breaking apart even really a realistic solution? And I bring this up in a conversation that we're having about the world's arena, right? We know that around the world we have real, very dangerous adversaries. You mentioned China. It's pretty serious. This is pretty serious stuff. A more divided America is only a more dangerous world. Mm-hmm. And so can Americans see this? Can we come together and unite, or are we just so broken over the division that has been created? I mean, like DEI, CRT, left versus right. I mean, it's so embedded in our culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So 3 short answers. 1, I do believe that Americans should balkanize and move to states where they feel best suited. 2, I do not believe that America should split. And here's why. Elon Musk actually put out a great tweet recently where he talked about how he does not want a national divorce, nor do I. And he said a lot of the people that are most angry at America, and they look at the racist founding, and it was slave foundation. We have our scars of our past, but America has come through and become one of the best countries in the history of the world, and we fixed a lot of our issues. And he said a lot of the people that are most angry at America, or that are most polarized in terms of hating their fellow American, we can bring them back. As much as they were programmed to hate, they can be deprogrammed to come back to e pluribus unum. And then just, patriotism is contagious, I believe. And especially when you have all oars rowing in the same direction. So I still believe in the unity of this country, and I think we can bring it back in short order too. We weren't this divided 15, 20 years ago, and I think it could come back real quick.
I think people are starting to wake up to some of the evil. You talk about the things that are projected to children right now, and I actually think that you say patriotism is addicting. Mm-hmm. I think fighting evil is addicting, and mm-hmm. I think that through this idea that we can remind people that they've been lied to and also open their eyes to the evil that is being done here, I do think that that is something that can be uniting, and hopefully America will find that leadership and the courage and the stamina to open their eyes and actually fight for truth, to fight against evil, and all of the things that we were talking about, how addicting it is, how fun it is, how enriching it is. I think that that is the hope that God brings to this incredible country that we live in. I just truly believe that God protects America because it's such an incredible nation. It's a light for the entire world. And I'm grateful to serve alongside you, and I'm excited. And I'm glad that you're optimistic. And whether we're optimistic or pessimistic, it doesn't even matter. We're going to keep fighting. So it's great sitting with you here today. I got to head back to Los Angeles. Sadly, it's California, but you're here in Florida holding down the fort. And from both coasts, we're going to keep squeezing it in, spreading good freedom, good ideas, courage. Let's fight that evil together. I love doing that work with you.
Amen. Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
God bless.